Hey everyone, it's Zack Beck. California Governor Gavin Newsom is facing a recall. This election is scheduled for September 14, 2021, and right now polling is showing this race is very close. So what I want to do in this video is break down in detail what is going on in the California recall election, the likelihood that Gavin Newsom could actually be recalled from office, and who is likely to take his place if he's actually removed. So let's take our time, dive into the details, and jump into it right now. As previously mentioned, California Governor Gavin Newsom is facing a recall election. You might be wondering how this actually got onto the ballot. Well, there's a very simple process that exists here in the state of California that allows elected officials to be recalled from office, and it's simply called the recall process. What this entails is that if a group of individuals who are voters in the state of California gather enough signatures against a specific elected official to remove them from office, then a question gets placed onto the ballot that allows the voters to decide whether or not to remove such an individual. This ranges from anyone who's on a local school board, a city council, all the way up to the governor of California. So what happens here is that if individuals meet the threshold of being able to remove someone from office and it gets placed on the ballot, then all that happens is there are two questions placed on the ballot. Question number one is whether or not you'd like to recall this individual from office, and question number two, who you'd like to replace them with. And that is exactly what is happening here in the state of California. And the reason why this ended up on the ballot is because of many issues specifically surrounding the pandemic. The recall process exists for many different reasons, but generally it exists that way if elected officials do something wrong, something egregious, or something corrupt, that then the voters can remove them from office and replace them with someone else. And what happened is during the course of the pandemic, Gavin Newsom was at the forefront of many different issues. He was the first governor in the United States to close all of the businesses and also require a stay-at-home order for citizens. This then led an entire wave of closures throughout the United States, and that also started to trickle throughout the rest of the world. Now, Gavin Newsom says that he put these measures into place to protect public health, although there were some individuals on the other side who argued that some of his issues were draconian and basically prevented people from being able to provide themselves from an economic perspective, and furthermore there were issues with social isolation that could affect individuals' mental health. So what we saw transpire is during the course of the pandemic, more and more individuals wanted to recall Newsom from office. Now this signature gathering continued during the course of the pandemic, even with the limitations of social distancing and not being able to go door to door and knock on people's door and ask them to sign such a petition. But what happened was in the summer of 2020, Gavin Newsom was seen at French Laundry, which is a very high-end, highfalutin type of restaurant where he was dining with political lobbyists. He was indoors, not wearing a mask and not social distancing with a large crowd. And this is at the same time when he was telling people not to go out to dinner, not to go out to restaurants, not to be within 6 feet of another individual, to wear masks, and he was also having businesses closed during that time. So what transpires after that news broke, we saw more voters sign the recall petition, and it eventually skyrocketed to 1.7 million signatures that were ultimately submitted to the California Secretary of State, which then triggered the special recall election. After the signatures were submitted to the California Secretary of State, there were still a few steps that needed to take place before the election date was actually set, and the responsibility actually fell onto the Lieutenant Governor to set the election date. Now it's important to note that the Lieutenant Governor is the same Democratic Party member as the current Governor Gavin Newsom. They are allies, so they definitely were thinking through what would be most strategic and beneficial to him when setting this election date. Now I know the Lieutenant Governor might be able to dispute that and say there was no politics when she was thinking about how to set this date, but personally from my experience in politics, I believe she set this intentionally. So what the date actually is set at is September 14, 2021. And this was set at a very odd time relative to what we're used to experiencing here in the state of California. For example, in November, that is when we generally have our regularly scheduled elections. So having this election scheduled in September is quite different, and that's what makes it very difficult to understand how likely voters are to actually participate. Even though here in the state of California, we have an overwhelming majority of Democratic registered voters, which gives Gavin Newsom an inherent advantage in this type of election. And because this election is an off year at an off time, it's very difficult to know if he's going to get the type of turnout and support from Democratic voters, whereas on the flip side, from both Republicans and more independent voters, they are much more motivated to vote because they already probably have a predisposition against the sitting governor. So what I want to do now is take a look at some of the most recent polling and how it looks like where Gavin Newsom stands right now and whether or not he's going to remain in office or if he's going to be recalled and who he's going to be replaced with. The most important thing you can do when it comes to this California recall election is voting for the like button for the YouTube algorithm. Just kidding, but if you wouldn't mind smashing that like button, it would help the channel out a lot. It would mean a lot to myself personally, as I do everything I can to create balanced content that makes a positive impact in your life, that encourages you and myself to lead lives of meaning and purpose, all while maintaining balance and moderation. So if you wouldn't mind smashing that like button, that would help me out a lot, and I hope it helps you out a lot as well. The California gubernatorial recall is making national headlines, and that is because Gavin Newsom has been in office for quite some time, and he is seen as a very prominent, somewhat rising star in the Democratic Party. Previously, he served as the mayor of San Francisco, then he was lieutenant governor of California, and now he is the current governor of California, and it's pretty clear that he has presidential aspirations beyond his time here in California. So what is happening here with this recall election could really have a ripple effect, not here throughout the state of California, but even for national politics as a whole. So here we're seeing some recent polling that is showing where the trend line is. And what I'm referencing right now is 538.com, which does basically an aggregation of where all the polls stand, because there have been polls all over the map. Some have shown Gavin Newsom losing by double digits, others have shown him winning by double digits. And really the biggest difference is how the polls are being conducted, whether they're being conducted against likely voters or all voters. And what you'll see is that when you have more likely voters being polled, and that being the focus group, what we see is the election is much tighter. When they're doing polling with just the aggregate of all the registered voters here in the state of California, it shows an advantage for Gavin Newsom. So from that perspective, right now on 538, it is showing that Gavin Newsom has a slight lead to be retained in office where he would not be recalled. Now, I'm not here to say that polls are going to be accurate and it's going to be exactly what happens. If we've learned anything from both the 2016 election and even the 2020 election, the polls fluctuate quite a bit, and that's even at the national level. It's even much more difficult at a state level to get very precise, accurate polling. So what we have right now, though, is a trend line that shows Gavin Newsom in a favorable position to retain his position, but he still could get recalled. Like I said, there was a Survey USA poll that was conducted that showed him losing by double digits. And once again, this really comes down to voter turnout. Who is more likely to participate? And if more Democrats participate, it is much more likely that we would see him getting retained in office. But if less Democrats participate and it's more Republicans and independents, it would more likely that he would get recalled from office. So it really just comes down, in my opinion, to voter turnout. And that's not to say that all Democrats support Gavin Newsom or all Republicans are against him, because there is bipartisan support for the recall, and there's also a bit of bipartisan support for Newsom. It's really a personal issue that each voter has to make up for themselves. And I'm not here to tell you that you're supposed to recall him or you're supposed to retain him or anything like that. That is up to your discretion. That's your opinion. I just want to let you know where things stand right now, and also the very importance of this race because it has national implications. One of the things you'll see with the state of California, like I previously mentioned, is that, like it or not, generally it sets a bit of the tone for the rest of the United States. Not because everyone's going to follow more left-leaning Democratic policies in other states, think Texas or Florida, that's not generally going to happen. But when you see some of the executive actions, specifically that surrounded the pandemic, when the closures first went into place, when the stay-at-home orders first went into place, we saw a lot of other states start to follow suit. And that might have been maybe more left-leaning states, think of like in Illinois or in New York, but still that had an impact. And because Newsom was at the forefront of that, we saw that transpire. So here you have a big implication. If he is retained in office, he still has the ability to get reelected in 2022 and pursue his long-term aspirations. But if Gavin Newsom gets recalled from office, this really clips him at the heels and prevents him from being able to make more progress long term. Now, what you've seen him say, and Gavin Newsom has been pretty clear about this, is he says this is a Republican-backed recall. Now, there is some truth to the fact that the original individual who started the petition to get him recalled did have Republican leanings. But I do think it's disingenuous to say that it's only a Republican-backed recall, because individuals who signed the actual petition are of various political persuasions. They both are Republican and Democrat, but even independent, libertarian, Green Party, there's a lot of people who've signed the petition. So irrespective of your opinion on that, and that is just the way that Gavin Newsom is framing this argument. And that is because it makes it much more clear for him to motivate his base of support on the Democratic side if he thinks this is only a partisan Republican power grab. And once again, this is not what I'm telling you that is actually happening, it's just how Gavin Newsom is framing this argument. And on the flip side, you had people who've been arguing against Gavin Newsom, saying that he has been a terrible governor and that's the reason why he should be recalled recalled, whereas some people would maybe say that he's been a great governor. He actually has a lot of support within the Democratic Party and the state writ large. So it's very interesting to see what is going on right here, and my approach on this is to make sure that you have as much information as possible to make as wise and well-informed decision as possible, and hopefully encourage your friends and family members who live here in the state to at least vote, because that is the most important thing that you can do right now, irrespective of your opinion on the governor, irrespective of what you think is going on with the state. I think it's important that you participate so that way your voice is heard and your values can be reflected in your government, because ultimately at the end of the day, this is supposed to be your government. It does get influenced by lobbyists and special interests and other moneyed interests that get in there, but if we sit on the sidelines, if we are apathetic and we don't participate, then we have no way of making a positive impact in our society because we're being silent. So I just encourage you, whatever your perspective is, if you're strongly Republican, Democrat, if you're Libertarian, Green Party, wherever you stand on the political spectrum or the political compass, it is important for you to be able to vote in this election to make sure your voice is heard. Now you might be asking yourself, well, if Gavin Newsom is recalled, who is going to replace him as the next governor of California? There is a very interesting process here in California, like I previously mentioned. There's 2 questions on this ballot. First question is, would you like to remove or recall Gavin Newsom from office? And then the second question is, if he is recalled, who you would like to replace him with? Right now, the current list of candidates, there are 46 candidates listed. There are 9 Democrats, over 30 Republicans, and a few independents. Right now, the polling shows that there's only a few candidates that actually stand to have a good shot of getting elected. On the Republican side, what we have seen happen is a lot of support consolidating around radio talk show host Larry Elder. He's been polling at the top of the pack, even ahead of some of the other maybe more politically experienced candidates, such as Kevin Faulconer, who's the former mayor of San Diego. Even John Cox is running, who ran against Gavin Newsom back in 2018, but he lost to Newsom by over 30 points. And then there's a state assembly member named Kevin Kiley, who actually represents Gavin Newsom's district, who is running. And then Caitlyn Jenner is running. So you have quite a few Republicans that are in the field, but Larry Elder is at the top of the pack. And with Larry Elder being at the top of the pack, he identifies more as a libertarian as opposed to a Republican. So that generally from a libertarian perspective is more fiscally conservative, but maybe more socially moderate to maybe even socially liberal. It's hard to define libertarianism from the perspective of it being far right or far left or anything along those lines, because it doesn't really fit the normal political spectrum. It's more along the lines of a political compass. It kind of picks a few different elements, and it's usually for less state control, kind of smaller government, and allows more individual liberty and freedom for people to make their own decisions. So you would think maybe when it comes to like mask mandates or vaccine mandates or business closures, probably less likely to happen underneath a libertarian type of governor, which Larry Elder says that he identifies as. So right now, current polling is showing him at the top of the pack. And when you think about that, that's important to be aware of, because if most Republicans turn out and they're consolidating support around him, and if less Democrats turn out, it's likely that he would be one of the individuals that's very well positioned to take office as the next governor of California. Now, on the Democratic side, really the only individual who's been polling at anywhere significance is Kevin Paffrath, also known as Meet Kevin from YouTube. And he's an individual who has some pretty bold plans from what I've been able to read so far. In addition, he participated in a debate against John Cox, Kevin Kiley, and Kevin Faulconer, where he outlined a lot of these proposals. Specifically, he's talked about wanting future schools, where you basically combine high school and junior college for people who have more of a trade school dynamic. He wants to cut taxes on individuals who make $250,000 or less, basically having no state income tax. And furthermore, he's claimed that he's going to be able to end the homelessness pandemic here in the state by having homelessness off the streets within 60 days, by building 80 facilities throughout the state, and then housing those individuals with hopefully the transition of getting them off the streets permanently. Now, he identifies himself as a JFK moderate-style Democrat, someone who maybe isn't super far left like an Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, but someone who's more in the middle, basically kind of when you think about JFK as more of a moderate type of Democrat. So on the political spectrum, a little bit, you probably have Larry Elder specifically a bit more to the right, and then you have Kevin Paffrath here more in the middle, but still center left. So from that perspective, if more Democrats turn out, they still have the option, even if they vote no on the recall, to vote on a replacement candidate. And if the polling continues to trend in that direction, Kevin Paffrath should be picking up a good amount of support on that side. Recent polling back in August even showed that Kevin Paffrath was at the top of the pack ahead of Larry Elder. Now that was more in early August, so things might have shifted since then, but ultimately it showed that was a poll that was conducted by the San Diego Union-Tribune and Survey USA amongst likely voters. It was a very detailed poll that showed him at the top of the pack with 27%, and then you had Larry Elder with 23%. Now what we've seen is that you had Larry Elder maybe take more of a lead, so it's likely that he has a bit more momentum right now, but I wouldn't count Kevin Paffrath out at all, because he does have a strong media presence, he has a strong following here on YouTube, and someone who's been outlining his policies and proposals significantly. But Larry Elder simultaneously previously has been doing a very good job of mobilizing his voters, getting his base to support him, and doing a lot of media appearances like on Fox News, OAN, and others, where hopefully he's generating more media attention, which generally translates into votes. So right now, it seems as though if Gavin Newsom is recalled from office, it's likely that it will either be Larry Elder or Kevin Paffrath as opposed to the remaining candidates. Now, I could be totally wrong, and we might be surprised on election day, and we might have someone else who leapfrogs both of them into first place. But I would say if the polling trend line continues in this direction, even what we've seen on 538, where they do an aggregate, basically combine all the polls together, it seems like that's the trajectory that we're heading in, where it looks like right now Gavin Newsom is in the direction of retaining his job, but if he is recalled from office, it's likely going to either be Larry Elder, who has a slight advantage right now, and then second would be Kevin Paffrath, but potentially could be either one of them, depending upon voter turnout. With all that being said, I'd like to thank you for watching the video today. If you wouldn't mind, please tap the like button for the YouTube algorithm. Help push this video to other people who might need to hear it. Furthermore, if you have any questions, please comment down below. I'd love to interact with you, get to know you, do any research on your behalf so you can make well and wise informed decisions for yourself moving forward. Furthermore, if you wouldn't mind, please subscribe to the channel. That would mean a lot to myself personally, as I do everything I can to create positive content that makes a positive impact in your life by encouraging you and myself to lead lives of meaning and purpose, all while maintaining balance and moderation. And if you do subscribe to the channel, please tap the notification bell. That will notify you every time I post a video, which I do on a weekly basis. Once again, I'd like to thank you for watching the video today. I hope you have a wonderful day. Talk to you next time. Whoopsh.